It's just coming. That's why I said if I get up in the morning, I know I have to work. I don't necessarily say I'm going to make work about this or that. It's like it's just going to happen. It's like it's just going to work. It's just, all that other stuff is going to come into play. You don't have to call on it. It's just there. It's life. I wake up in the morning. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I don't go through slumps. I mean, the work is sort of like, it's self-perpetuating, and so it lives on itself. So it's like I get up, what I investigated yesterday has led to some new realization, and I'm onto that. It's not like, I have all these answers, and it's like the work is like without a struggle. I mean, actually struggle is, the fact that you don't have the answers is actually the most beautiful part of the journey.
That was meaty. There was a lot of really good food in there.
That's a full meal with leftovers for
leftovers
tomorrow. Yes, sir.
With lots of leftovers tomorrow. I think I've heard that before somewhere.
Absolutely. The kind that you're excited to, reheat and bring to work tomorrow. The kind that actually, some leftovers, the flavors get to know each other overnight. Yeah. It's better the next day. It's that.
Yeah, this tastes a whole lot better today than it did yesterday. Yeah, it's that type of meal.
Absolutely. So welcome to Talking Food with Nathan and Ty, where we talk about leftovers primarily. Today we're going to talk about one of both of our absolute art heroes, Leonardo Drew. Cannot wait to get into this, but let's do a quick little update since it's been a minute since we've recorded a new episode, which, by the way, we'll go to you first, Ty, but by the way, I just want to say thanks to everybody for hanging with us. We try to stay on our regular every other week schedule, but we are both working artists, and the art always comes first. So, if we miss a week here and there, thanks for hanging with us and coming on back. But Ty, what have you been up to? I know you just got back from a really exciting trip.
Yeah, I just got back from the Marfa Invitational in Marfa, Texas. I was there for 11 days, I think. So it was just an incredible, not just event, but connection of artists and art lovers and people in just a magical place. Marfa, Texas is to me very, very magical. And man, I got to connect with some of my closest friends that you and I both know, Eric Breach and V No, two of my closest friends. We spent a lot of time together hanging out, and V's new person, Samuel Levi Jones, who's a brilliant artist out of Indianapolis. So I got to spend a lot of time with the three of them, talking art, talking life, getting deep. We did the Chinati Foundation tour together. So we got to walk through Donald Judd and Dan Flavin and John Chamberlain's museums together. And that was, when you're doing that with other artists, it's just the best. And whether our tour guide loved that or not, she was sweet, but she had to really, really know her stuff with the four of us constantly asking questions or knowing answers that maybe she didn't know. And as artists also speaking into things too. So it was incredible. And I got to meet so many artists across the state of Texas because this exhibition was just Texas artists. I think we had 160 artists in there, and maybe 500-600 works of art in the room. And so fun to connect with artists that I've followed maybe for a long time and have never met in person, or that have followed me for a long time on Instagram, haven't met in person, and then new artists. Just that was, for me, one of the things I love more than anything about art and being at shows is getting to meet artists. So lots of conversations, lots of new, fresh conversations, but a lot of very moving moments discussing work and things that are going on in the art world. So it was fabulous, and just got back 2 days ago, and we had a lot of time. We talked a lot about our this episode, Leonardo Drew, as well, because for Eric and I, and for Samuel, he's one of our favorite artists too. So
absolutely,
it's fun leading up.
Absolutely. I love it. And you're just a little life update. You are getting close to moving into the new studio. Not quite yet.
Yeah, I probably could have set up in there today, but it would have been really echoey because it's completely empty. So I figured I'll stay in the garage for another day, and you guys can have the treadmill and all my folded up stuff in the background on video. But yeah, I'll probably start moving things in from the garage into the studio when we're off this recording.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait. We've been trying to get into this. I was looking back at our outline here, and we have been working on this and listening to tons of different art talks. he's a phenomenal listen. I mean, we're going to play a bunch of quotes, so I don't really need to say that because that'll be evident if it's not already as we play a bunch more of these. But just the way that he talks about work and just the absolute joy that emanates from, every word that he says is just, it's super, super fun. But we would definitely encourage you to go and check out. We'll cite our sources in the show notes as well, but we've got 4 or 5 different talks and sources that we're going to be pulling from. But Ty, why don't you go ahead and cue us up with a little bit of a brief bio on Mr. Drew before we dive in.
Yeah, and I don't want to give too much away because we're going to be diving into some of his biography throughout some of these quotes too, but an incredible artist in many, many forms with a pretty rare story too, I would say, behind his art making and how he got to where he is and where he started out and where he's ended up today. And he is between today San Antonio, Texas and New York. And so he's going back and forth. I know he's doing a lot in San Antonio, but he's in New York a lot and he travels around the globe. We'll talk about that pretty regularly too. But he was born in 1961 in Tallahassee, Florida. And he grew up in a home near a landfill. And then I don't know when he moved to Connecticut, but at some point in there, he was born in Florida, moved to Connecticut. And he's known for large scale installations and mixed media works that explore a lot of themes wrapped up within it. And I'm actually not going to talk about the themes because I don't think he would want me to. So I'm not going to talk about what people have guessed these themes are, even what he's talked about, because we'll get into why I'm not going to do that for you. I want you to discover those things yourself when you look at his work. But his art does have some personal narrative and environment and memories of environments wrapped up within it as well. And if you've ever stood in front of one of his works, which I've been blessed to see a few, mind blowing. Honestly, absolutely shockingly mind blowing to me. And he's somebody that I refer to any artist that's been in my mentorship program who's a sculptor or an installation artist. He's usually right at the top of that list. When I send them research, I'm like, dive in to Leonardo Drew immensely. Anything and everything you can get your hands on, listen to it, read it, buy it, go see it.
Yeah. I mean, you when you see his pieces in person, it just dominates the room that it occupies, that they occupy. And it's something where it almost makes whatever else might be in that space really hard to appreciate because it is so overwhelmingly all consuming. It's really, really quite something. So if you have not had a chance to see his work in person, photos don't do it justice, as is the case with most, 3-dimensional work. But let's go ahead and throw in another quote that kind of dovetails off the one that we opened up with, just talking about his insane work ethic.
Yes.
Something like that. 16. 16. 17, 18. There used to be 20-hour days, but I stopped that. Like in the studio, what usually happens is I'm rotating 7 things, and they kind of balance one another. And I find that they assist one another in completing themselves. So it's never just one thing. I'll work on something, and I'll take it to near completion. And if it's not working out, I'll take it apart and I'll make something else with it.
All right, so there's a lot there to dive into, but I want to begin by, again, kind of circling back to that opening quote that we shared.
It's just coming. That's why I said if I get up in the morning, I know I have to work. I don't necessarily say I'm going to make work about this or that. It's like it's just going to happen. It's like it's just going to work. It's just, all that other stuff is going to come into play. You don't have to call on it. It's just there. It's life. I wake up in the morning. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I don't go through slumps. I mean, the work is sort of like, it's self-perpetuating, and so it lives on itself. So it's like I get up, what I investigated yesterday has led to some new realization, and I'm onto that. It's not like, I have all these answers, and it's like the work is like without a struggle. I mean, the actual struggle is, the fact that you don't have the answers is actually the most beautiful part of the journey.
Just his work ethic, when you watch the videos, and again, definitely encourage y'all to go, and the Art 21 is fantastic. That's a great place to start. But when you see his studio, his process, like he is working, he is dressed for manual labor. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So boots, back brace, gloves, you see, all types of different, construction tools in his space, and it's absolutely just inspiring to see the way that like he clocks in, right? And we've talked about this a lot in previous episodes as well, but just the work ethic of for him. I don't need to wonder what I'm going to do. I know I'm going to go to work, and the work continues to perpetuate more and more work.
Well, because of that, he says in that first quote, I don't go through slumps.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's just like, I'm constantly working. And so I'm always discovering because I'm constantly working. And he, at the end of that quote, he's investigating yesterday has led to something new. And now he's on to that. So now he's moving to the next thing. And I have all these answers, and the work is without struggle. He says struggle is the fact you don't have the answers. That's the most beautiful part of the journey. And we talk about this all the time, right? It's like if you're constantly working, you're constantly having questions. And every time you kind of get to an answer, it's providing a new question. And that's kind of his search and his process. And I do think it's funny when he says, where is it in the quote? In the studio, he says, where is it? I'm rotating 7 things and they balance on one another. And he has this philosophy of the 7 crying babies. I don't know if you came across that. I think that might have been in the Carrie Scott podcast. And he talks about
he says that in almost every interview. I don't think we
pretty much every interview. But 7. So it's like, if one baby's crying and you quiet it, there's still another 6 babies crying. And then once you go to adjust the other baby, then that one starts crying. And so it's this repeated circle of there's always something to be moving. And if you watch the videos and things, there are times when he'll tell the person interviewing, if you're here long enough, you're going to start moving things because while we're in the studio, I'm seeing this and that's got to move and this needs to move. And that just shows us how in it he is. He's so in it that even when he's in the interview, he's going, oh, I need to move those 3 things. So as soon as we do a cut here, you're going to come help me move these.
Right.
You know, and the absolute physicality, though, of his work, as you said, too. He's had hand surgeries on both hands. He's about to have double knee surgery. Like, he is somebody who is physically and mentally and emotionally so grounded in the work he's making that it is breaking him down in ways too, because he's so in it. He's not stopping. He has to do it. We'll hear about that later, but how do you relate to that?
Well, how much time do you have? I mean, one of the things about that opening clip I think that was from the
MAD.
Yeah, the
Museum of Art
and Design. Yeah. That's about a 5-minute video. It's fantastic. One of the things that jumped off the screen to me when I was watching that was it's a very brief cut, but it's his punch list for the day, right? Yeah. And so a punch list is, I think that term, I'm pretty sure that term comes from construction. It definitely does, because from my experience, working in the trades and working, underneath proper tradespeople and contractors. But a punch list is like the last list of things that need to be done before the project is finished, right? So as your project going on at your place right now, they've got a punch list, and sometimes they think it's done, and sometimes, in your case, the homeowner would say, actually, there's a few more things we need to add to that. But I just love that. I mean, that's a very, just such a work-driven approach to these are the things that need to be done and what's the next thing on the list. And so I just got the biggest smile on my face, because that's how I relate to that, right? Like every day I've got probably, 4 or 5 different legal pads in addition to my, journals where I'm writing about the work, but I've got these legal pads and a lot of 3x5 note cards all over the place of different, punch lists for the day, because that's what I can't speak for him, but that's what keeps me on track, knowing that, hey, when because that's an interesting thing about those long 14, 16, 20-hour days. Like, I think it'd be very difficult. Very rare is the artist who can work that long period. But especially, I think it's the type of work that he does certainly lends itself to longer days. 100%. And I can relate to this because so much of it is just very task driven. It's like, I'm going to be dissecting this piece, in his case, weathering, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I'm going to be assembling all of these, little pieces. So before you know it, 3, 4, 5 hours have gone by just doing very manual, labor intensive work. That's really what stuck out to me the most. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're all different. I mean, this is the thing. Like, just because Leonardo Drew does that doesn't mean that you or myself or any other artist listening is going, oh man, I don't put in enough work. Nothing's going to happen for me. I can't put in 6, right? It's like, it's all different for everybody. And there's plenty of artists, including myself. I work a lot, but there are times where I go into the studio and I work an hour, or I go into the studio and I just read a little bit. I go into the studio one day and I could work for 6 or 8 hours. I could work for 10 or 15 hours. Then there's periods of time where I'm working minimally, but I'm doing something.
Yeah.
And so, and it's, but I also have a family, as well. So there's that balance too of balancing, life outside the studio with life inside the studio. And for Leonardo, it's just him, he's solo. So he's really putting as much time as he can to do those things. And there's a quote that I love by Van Gogh that says, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Mm-hmm. Right. And in essence, that's everything you just said. And that's everything that Leonardo just said. Yeah. All these small things, the punch list, the journals, the notes, all that in that time, all of those little things, like great things are done. Great art is made in the end by all those things coming together and having an intersection. Thinking of all those small things being brought together to really create something great in the end, really for Leonardo started at a young age in his early years too, growing up around a dump and seeing so many different little things all over as a child. I think we have a really good clip of him talking about that.
We do. Here it is.
And the dump was my playground. So I played out there, like all of us did. I mean, I had a different, take on what the dump was. I mean, I was grabbing things there and trying to make things. Others were there, like I said, playing around the cesspool and falling into it, So, my beginnings in terms of how I probably see even found objects and what they mean to me and how I'm trying to echo that in my works had its beginnings there.
I love the fact that early memories, because, memory plays such a big part in my work and everything that I do. Yeah. But I love when I get to hear those stories from my favorite artists and how their memories impact their work later on. And so just seeing those discarded items and that fascination with materials and random things, right, that are not art supplies. It's something, they're not art supplies. They're random things, how that really, really did infect and get inside him to create this visceral response later on to adapt his art making to kind of reflect some of those things. It's just, it's wonderful.
When I listened to him tell that story, it really triggered a visceral memory for me that I hadn't previously connected to my practice today. But when I was a kid, I've talked about this I think before, but would wander around in the woods and just explore and journal, write, sketch, take photos, just be out in my own little world. There's a bunch of city land behind where I lived, and it was just my playground. But there was a dump that was adjacent to the city land, and sometimes I would wander through there, and it was a playground. It was absolutely. I remember just being whatever I was, 7, 8, 9 years old, and I would drag a bunch of just cool looking objects that I thought were interesting back to the house, and my dad was very forgiving, but he said, all right, this is your space to keep your pile of things. And it can't grow. You have to decide if you're going to do something with it. We can't just be, collecting garbage in the garage. I remember once I found this just perfect piece of his really, really soft aluminum piping that I then pounded into some kind of a samurai sword, right? So then or what I thought looked like a samurai sword, and I would, take that back into the woods with me for protection, obviously. But yeah, no, it's super interesting. And so I think about those moments of just like that. Oh, wow. Look at this. What could I do? What could this be? What could I do with this? And I don't know. I just had never really occurred to me how much that relates to all of the dumpster diving and the walks that I take with Leo, my dog, just finding things now. But that's what I'm chasing, is that moment that I felt as a child of just like, this is incredible. Look at this one of a kind gem that was just laying out here, discarded, disposed of. No one cares about it, but I will. It's amazing.
Well, I think that's a really good segue into something here with Leonardo, because there was something that he saw at this point as a young boy, that he saw something that literally just changed everything for him, like slapped him in the face in such a way that he just had to switch. He had to like change directions. And this is young. This is what, 16? Was it, or was it like 14? It might have been around 14 or 15 years old. I can't remember exactly the age, but it's in that young teenage years. And he was a brilliant illustrator and comic book designer, like himself, drawing comic books and illustrator, like incredible, to the point where at 13 or 14 years old, he got famous for it. He did a Captain America drawing that ended up in a show that got the attention of Marvel, DC, Heavy Metal Magazine. And I know he loves to tell the story of Marvel and DC were battling out to sign him, to bring him on. And at the time, it was when the first Christopher Reeve Superman film came out. And Marvel wasn't doing films or anything. They were just page comic books. And DC was, well, we're making movies, so you should definitely come with us.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that was one of those things he was really considering, because, I mean, that was his dream at that point in time. I want to be a comic book artist.
Yeah.
I want to draw, and there's some success when he's, as a child, was struggling in the projects. And it's like all of a sudden there's just could be this success. And then I'll let Drew talk about what happened to him at this point in his life.
I was drawing and using colored inks and things like that. People in the neighborhood, the projects where I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, they were telling me about this place called the ABCD Cultural Arts Center. They said that, well, you have to go there because they have paints and canvases. And I said, wow, this is all this stuff for free. So once I made my way over to them, I ended up with these mentors, a fantastic group of artists who were just there helping kids. And I was one of them. My goodness. Just copying cartoons here. Just copied directly from television, like whatever I was watching. I had the facility to be able to do that at a young age, but at the same time, it was an original thought. You'll find this is actually from the newspaper article when I was my first exhibition at age 13, and we used it as a flyer. And of course, these are much later. I was approached by DC Comics and Heavy Metal Magazine and Marvel Comics to do work for them. When I saw this black and white reproduction of Jackson Pollock's work when I was in the library in high school, that was it. And that was my first take on what fine art was. You can imagine Jackson Pollock when he's black and white, but it still, elicited such a visceral response that when seeing it, I was kind of like, wow, this is amazing. And from that point on, I began to question, what I was doing up against what I had seen and what I had felt, more actually what I had felt. Probably would have been like 15.
Think about that, Nathan. Like, to me, somebody who really kind of grew up in and around poverty, in and around struggling families, and he has this ability that is really uncomparable where he's from.
Right.
And then he has an opportunity, and then he comes across this black and white of Pollock, and he goes, and he has so many different responses and interviews to that. I was shocked. I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. I was marveled by it. It just wooed me. But the whole thing was like, he didn't realize that something else existed outside of what he was doing. And he already had the full artist spiritual mindset and soul at that age, where it went, oh, no, there's something else for me to chase here.
Right.
That seems much bigger.
Yeah.
Unending, that doesn't have an end. Everything I'm doing right now has an end.
Yeah.
I draw the figure, I do this, I do the story, whatever, and it just kind of stops. To him, he said, this feels like there's something like unending. What am I going to do? And then he decided to go to college for it, went to Parsons for 2 years. And I think he said in an interview, like, it just was boring him. Yeah. It wasn't giving him the opportunity to be completely free in the way he wanted to go. So he transferred to Cooper Union and had a pretty incredible set of mentors at Cooper Union, including one of our other favorite artists, Jack Whitten, who was if you look at Leonardo's early work, you can see the mirror reflection in a lot of those early pieces too, before he went sculptural and installation. Even the 2D and flat wall pieces are really, in my eyes, a swan song to Witten in a way as well. But just to me, man, it completely like blew me away, that story of this kid overcoming in a way that was like quick success. Don't want it.
Right. At 15
I want
years
the hard
old.
I want the hard work to discover.
Yeah. Having that level of resolve because he was touched at such a soul level, and just knowing, it didn't even sound like it was that difficult of a decision. He just knew. Nope.
He knew.
I'm supposed to go this way, not that way. It's incredible. It's
when he said,
incredible.
I saw that picture and I knew right then.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's like it was this instant thing. And, it's almost like the Helen Frankenthaler story of walking into the Betty Parsons gallery and seeing the Pollock show for the first time. Yeah. And then her running back to her studio and putting canvas on the ground and doing her thing. And she says, all I needed was permission.
Right.
I just hadn't gotten it yet.
That's right.
Like, to me, that piece, and I have this conversational thing, whether you like Pollock or not, whether you think his work's terrible or you love his work, you're inspired by it or not, he has given an enormous amount of artists in history permission to go experiment and do things that didn't seem like they were supposed to be doing. It just gave them the ability to go, I can do whatever I want. Let's go. Let's do it.
Yes. There's another quote I want to share here where he speaks to how he sort of got to the point of making that decision.
My ability to be able to draw and paint well actually was getting in the way of me realizing something larger. It's hard to get past something so beautifully done and then at the same time ask the question, what's underneath that? I decided it was time for me to stop using what I did well. So what I did was almost literally tied my hands. I said, okay, you can no longer paint or draw, and you're going to have to find another way to create.
Again, go watch these videos because you see some of these illustrations that he was doing, as a high schooler, and these illustrations are, you can absolutely see why he was getting the attention that he was from DC, from Marvel, why he had options to stay on that path. I think this is an interesting question. I think one that would be worth discussing for us, but I think he brings up a critical question that would be valuable for all of us to ask ourselves, which is, am I too comfortable? Is what I'm doing now too easy? Right?
Yeah.
And we may or may not have the strength of character to completely, in his words, tie our hands behind our back and completely set aside something that is working.
Yeah.
But wow, what's on the other side of that? Am I getting too comfortable? Have I done what I needed to do here? And what else is on the other side of what might be? And also realizing that obviously there are a lot of ways to get from one place to another, but there's a lot of value in completely setting aside that thing or the things that are making us comfortable, that are keeping us comfortable, and completely opening up a complete new vein of work that wouldn't have been possible had we remained tethered to the thing that was working, that was keeping us comfortable. What do you think about that? What's I know there's been times in your career, because you've been at this a while. You've made a number of different decisions, conscious or maybe at a subconscious level, to make different shifts. So how do you think about that question and that decision?
Yeah. And just to remind everybody, if you haven't listened to our episode from March 27th, The Greater the Artist, the Greater the Doubt, we kind of go into some of these ideas about Nathan and myself in our studio practice pretty intensely and thickly. So just a reminder for everybody, that's the March 27th episode. This spoke to me so much. It was a confidence builder for me, really studying and diving into Leonardo for this episode, because I really try to be what he is in that way. And he's really taken, that first jump, he's taking his existing facilities, right, of what he knows how to do and is extremely good at, drawing. Mm-hmm. And he completely went opposite. Yeah. You know what I mean? So he left the control, he left the plan, he left, I mean, all that's planning, it's control, it's whatever. Mm-hmm. He completely, like you see, tied his hands and went totally different. Yeah. You know, completely different. And that's something every time I find I'm really, really, truly controlling something, I'm switching it up. I feel like, okay, I'm asking questions with everything I'm trying here. And the second I start to resolve those, I want a whole lot more questions. I don't want just one more question. I want 100 more questions to go explore, because I know what that end road is going to be. I know what's going to happen. Gosh, what an example. Look at Leonardo's first works. Look at his first works and then look at today. Like, you see this gradual, slow ramp to things just exploding in ways. And I think too, I mean, what it took him 7 years to get there. I think we talk about that in a minute, but he had this moment of just disappearing into the studio to work things out for a very long period of time before pushing work out there.
Right.
Like, who has that persistent patience to do that? I mean, I've done it in 6 months.
Years,
I've done it in 6 months.
Something that was giving him recognition, shows, and was absolutely working. It's tremendous. I mean,
it's incredible.
You talk about questions, back to that first quote that we shared. The struggle is the fact that you don't have the answers is actually the most beautiful part of the journey.
Absolutely.
That's the beautiful part. You talk about asking more and more questions, and most of which we won't have the answers to when they're asked. We may never find the answers definitively, but it's the journey that really excites us, that leads us to the next place.
Yep.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. There's another quote I want to share here, Ty, unless you had something else on that.
Yep.
All right.
There is no escaping your past. With certainty, absolute certainty, I can look back on some of the configurations that I've created, and I can see those projects. I can see the landfills.
There's no escaping your past. I don't know about you, but when I heard him say that, it brought me back to Louise and how much of her past is baked into all of her work, all of the memories, all the experiences that she had. I think it was Fellini that said all art is autobiographical.
Yeah.
So if we agree that that's true, I do. I think you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't have to be, I mean, autobiographical can mean anything, It doesn't have to be an objective narrative sense. It can be, of course, but it doesn't have to be, right? It's going to be just baked into the DNA of everything that you make, because it's coming from you and it's flowing through you.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, even before we started listening to this, because I was reading a book about one of my favorite authors, Madeleine L'Engle, and she was talking about when she was writing another book. And she was saying how each time she's writing about a character that may be 14 years old or 15 years old. So let's say she's writing about a character who's a 14-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. And she says, I have to go back to when I'm 14 and think about who I was, what I did at that point to write about that. And she said, so many writers have trouble doing that. And then she says this quote, I'm still every age I've ever been. And that's a very simple thing, but we forget that often. And I think what Leonardo's saying and what you and I believe is, even then when those memories and those ideas are coming back, we're able to really put ourselves back into that moment when we're making and be that, right? It's you working on a piece that you discovered in the woods, and then remembering when you and your dad were walking through the woods and you found this piece, right? And you wanted to go put it in your pile, right? And then your dad, well, you need to take some stuff out of there then. If you're going to put these pieces in, we need to, so it's like, but it's baked in. It's 100% baked in. I just love that quote. Like, I'm still every age I've ever been. So when I'm telling stories of moments in my life, it's just, I've got tears like welling up, because it's a very simple thing, but it's so powerful.
Yes.
And especially for an artist, when those things are baked in and you're sharing stories and you're thinking of moments, whether it's healing, trauma, addiction, recovery, all these things, you're still that person. And I think that's what Louise was the best at for me in art. When she made some of those works, she was creating as the 15-year-old Louise, who is just dying inside for her father to respect her. Right.
Yes.
And when you walk into one of those rooms, you are right in there, whether you know what it's saying or not. It has the power to touch you in a way that you go, I think I need to really go research this piece because it just did something to me that is so powerful that I need to run and check this out.
I think I shared this story in a previous episode, but I'm going to share it again just since we're talking about Louise. But I was at the Art Institute of Chicago with my mom, 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah, you sent me that picture.
Yeah. Walked into a room full, I think there were 8 or 9 Louise pieces in the room, and my mom had no context. We had some drive time as a road trip to go see some family. And so I made her listen to our episode as we were killing some drive time after that. But she walked in the room without, but so that was really cool to watch, to see her experience that the depth of her work without any context. And just before I went full art nerd and, told her everything that, that I knew and for context purposes. But before I did that, I asked her, like, how does this sit with you? How does this make you? And it was just tremendous. We talk about, I'm still every age I've ever been. We were out to dinner last night. Our daughter had a choir concert. And so we're out to dinner afterwards with my wife and our 2 girls and my mom. And I said something ridiculous, as I often do. And our youngest was like, how old are you? And I said, well, sweetie, I'm 45 and I'm also 15. and so, which is absolutely true. And so but I think about, when you talk about, Louise, it's being able to tap into that, the 5-year-old, the 10-year-old, the 20, right? Through the lens of wisdom and lived experience that we've acquired along the way. That's different. That's different than how we would have been able to even, articulate or communicate our experience at those younger ages. But it's beautiful. It's just beautiful.
Love it. There it is. Love it.
Yeah, you got to double down. You can't.
Love it. Love it.
Listen, that's the tie, ladies and gentlemen. That is the tie. Love it. Love it.
Love it.
But it never sounds like you do.
Yeah, but I do. I mean, I catch myself, Nathan, now saying that to people on the phone, and I just think of you making fun of me for going, you're not excited about what I said.
You've got beautiful energy, but when you love it, love it.
Oh, yeah.
When you say that to me, it's like, let's time to move on.
Let's move on to
I'm
Act
not
2.
actually interested in what we're talking about right now.
Oh, man.
Let's play another clip.
Yeah.
One of the issues that has consistently come up when people write about the art is that they talk about found objects. Actually, I don't work with found objects. Most of my materials I actually created in the studio. So I actually go out and I buy material, brand new stuff. I actually become the weather.
So Ty, I don't know about you. I saw one of Drew's pieces before I knew anything about him. It was quite a while ago. And I remember viewing the work, being blown away by it. And then when I later learned that everything was self-manufactured, was created by him and by the weather, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it's mind blowing to think that almost everything that he uses, he purchases in its, raw basic form and does everything to those materials to make it look the way that it does. It's pretty wild. I mean, so for those of you that may not be familiar with his work, definitely go and look at his work through that lens of, he touched all that a lot, through so many different processes and things that he learned over time to transform those materials from what they once were into what they are now. It's that
wowed me.
Yeah.
Like I had no idea. I had no clue.
Right.
And I guess I would consider myself a mini Drew Storian or Drewite now, because I love the guy so much. And I think it's not just his work, but it's his personality and joy that just exudes anytime I watch him.
Yes.
I'm just even more in love with him. But so being a Drew Storian, it's like, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
It would not make sense if everything was just a found object and already weathered and put together. No, he is taking, somebody who is using found objects and doing ready-mades and things, and he's completely creating every bit of wood or piece of all these things into art pieces.
Yeah.
Right. So he is the medium.
You know what I mean? So there's a more in-depth quote on the weathering process that we're going to share in just a second here. But you brought up something really important that I wanted to discuss today. But it's the absolute joy that exudes from. I mean, this is a happy human being.
It's marvelous.
It's marvelous because he's so fun to listen to. He's such a great communicator. He's just joyful, and I think it was definitely the Carrie Scott interview on her podcast Scene, which is fantastic. That's on all the podcast places. Definitely go listen to that. That's of the 8 different long form interviews that I listened to in preparation for this. That's one of my favorites for sure. But she says this and she identifies it so perfectly. She said, there's such a, and I'm paraphrasing here, but there's such a difference between your personality, which is so light and joyful, and the heaviness of your work. And I do not recall his response exactly, but it was a form of this is me. This is the work. But it was such an interesting thing to think about. I had an interesting experience in Munich after the opening. After the opening, the Benjamin at the gallery, he said, one thing I heard a lot from a lot of people who were there was they didn't, the people that talked to you or heard you talk, they didn't expect you to be this way after seeing your work. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you don't seem like somebody who would make work like this. And I said, I think that's a compliment. But it was interesting to hear. And I was like, that's interesting. It was actually, so when I heard that as part of the interview, it was encouraging that any type of work can come from any type of person. Back to our earlier quote of, you can't escape your past, and what's in you is going to come out through your work. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be any certain way that is or is not consistent with how your work appears. Some of my favorite work, again, it's way more about the art than the artist, but I love being surprised.
Sure.
When there is a gap of what you think somebody who makes this type of work and how they occur, how they present, how they communicate. It's a really interesting thing.
Absolutely. Let's hear more. Yeah, let's hear more about his process. Make sure to tune in to episode 2 of Leonardo Drew to hear more about his process. Coming soon. Stay tuned.